the impact and influence of Thirukkural in all the dialect literature. I am not a scholar in many languages. I know only Tamil. But through years, that is Sevichelom, the wealth acquired by hearing, through years, I had learned that many dialect literature have been influenced by Thirukkural. Kabir Das, he wrote Doha, Kabir ke Dohe. Doha means couplet, two-lined poetry. When I heard Kabir ke Dohe, recited by Hindi scholars, and when he narrated the meaning, I came to know of the influence of Thiruvallur in Kabir. For example, in one Kural, Valluvar will be telling, Nandrangal Allava Kanbavar, Andrangal Allarpaduvathu Yavan. When experiences of pleasure come, we enjoy. But when misery comes, we curse. That's the meaning of the Kural. Kabir ke Dohi, in one of his Dohi, he tells, Sako Raki, Saya, Mari Sake Nahi Koya, Sukame Subirana Sabakari, Dukame Kari Nahi Koya. This Doha, this actually illustrates the same meaning. The same meaning as Kural. There is one Mahakavi Vemana in Telugu. He has given many stanzas on dialect literature, which is called Vemana Padyamulu. When I heard many Vemana Padyamulu, when I heard many poems from a Telugu scholar, I came to know of the influence of Thirukkural in Vemana. For example, I can narrate one stanza, that is Ida Naridal. Valluvar tells, we should assess the venue in war strategy, in political strategy, we should assess the venue. Because of the venue, anything is stronger. Because of the lack of venue, any strong thing gets weaker. He tells crocodile. In water, the crocodile is stronger. It can even grab the leg of an elephant. But when it is out, it will be humiliated by a dog. Nedumpunalul vellum mudali, adumpunalul ningin adhani pera. Vemana tells, neediloni mudali nigida yenakapatti, బయట కుక్క చేత బంకపడినవి స్థానబలమి కాని తలబలిమి లేదయా విశ్వధరామిని వినిరవేమ. నథింగ్. నీడిలోని మొదలి, నీడిలోని is in water. నీడి, నీళ్ళు is నీర్, in water. మొదలి is మొదలి. Crocodile. Crocodile in water, నిగిడ ఏనుగ పట్టు, ఏనుగ is elephant. It grabs elephant. బయట, outside. కుక్క చేత, by dog, by mere dog. It is humiliated, బంకపడినవి. So, when we read the literature, the direct literature, the literature of Indian languages, we will come to know definitely the impact and influence of Thiruvallur orally. Not as a printed word, but orally. It got printed only by Virama Munivar, Constant and Beski. But before that, it has orally influenced very many poets in very many parts of India. So, Thirukkural is an icon of Indian wisdom and universal humanism. V.V.S. Iyer, in his book Maxims of Thiruvallur, comments as, Thiruvallur as one of those seers whose message is intended not merely for their own age or country, but for all time, for all mankind. He has given to the world a word which in perfection of form, profundity of thought, nobleness of sentiment, and earnestness of moral purpose, very few books outside the grand scriptures of humanity can all be compared. My interest is not to add tributes one by one. Like V.V.S. Iyer, almost all the Tamil scholars describe Thirukkural as a book for all time and for all mankind. Dr. V.C. Kodandasamy, a renowned scientist, poet, and writer, he asked, in a world that undergoes change and evolves continuously, how long any book or concept endure? In case it endures, what is the source of its eternal relevance? These are the questions proposed by V.C. Kodandasamy. It is a futuristic perspective of Thiruvallur that had made it as an eternal treasure trove of super wisdom. Let me give you a short introduction about the futuristic approach. Change is happening at an even faster rate today, driven partly by technological changes, leading to changes in all other areas of our lives, and by the increasing interdependence between countries and peoples today, as well as the decentralization of societies and institutions within countries, also furthered by information technologies of today. The end of the Cold War is also changing political and economic borders, systems, and alignments as everyone seeks to become part of a global economy and society, while still maintaining national, ethnic and cultural identities and meaning, while the danger of all-out nuclear war between the US and the previous USSR, that is, now Russia and 14 other former republics of the Soviet Union, has greatly receded. With the end of the Cold War, nuclear terrorism still remains a threat to the humankind. So there are many problems posed by the mankind, such as sustainable development, preservation of the environment, and many other dangers. This has made it necessary for governments, businesses, organizations, and people to better understand change and the future. Since we all will be living and working in a future world that promises to be different from today in many ways, when people better understand change, they also often see more opportunities for their lives and ways to better positively influence that future is being created by them for the welfare of them. While there have always been futurists in the sense of people who look into the future and who try to understand change, the field of future studies itself, which tends to be very interdisciplinary, really arose during World War II and in the post-war period since then. Here I wish to point out to the students, to the research scholars, that you should not confuse futurism with the futurist perspective. Futurism and futurist perspective are different things. Futurism is an art and literary movement. Futurism is a post-warism. In futurism, the living things will be depicted as mechanical objects. In poetry, in futurism, similes and metaphors will be taken from science. Vladimir Mayakovsky is a Russian poet. He was a proponent of futurism in poetry. And futurism had its own career in the modernist words called vers libre. But now futurism, nobody cares for futurism in poetry. But futurism still lives in painting. That is different from the futuristic perspective. Within the futures field, there have always been a wide range of views and perspectives from people who have come from a very wide range of different disciplines and backgrounds and interests. Futurists run a neat gamut of views between the following two poles and everything in between. There are two poles, extreme poles. The one is doom and gloom futurists, so-called because they tend to focus on current real world problems without easy solutions, such as the nuclear danger during the Cold War or the continuing population explosion, world hunger, depletion of fossil fuels and other non-renewable resources, and environmental preservation and pollution, and project these trends into the future, showing that if current trends continue, then the future will be much worse than the present. It is important to note that even doom and gloom futurists are not totally pessimistic. However, indeed, no futurist would dedicate their whole life in studying change and the future if they were totally pessimistic. The major reason for pointing out negative trends and scenarios for the future is to alert the people to the potential problems ahead, so that the humans can be informed and change our current policies so that a more desirable future can be created or evolved. The another extreme of the futurists is futurists who create different scenarios of the future, from negative doom and gloom views to most probable or likely views to positive visionary views, and in-between perspective that acknowledges all these possibilities for the world future, and which points out that our actions and policies now will help to determine which of these scenarios actually transpires in the future. As an evolution of these two extreme poles comes the other group called positive, visionary, and evolutionary futurists. They focus more on positively imaging the more desirable features that we would like to create, articulating the positive value that we would like a future world to be based on, focusing on technological, societal, and human potentials, tracking groups that are actually trying to create such preferable features in the world today, and generally empowering people to see that we always have choices in that we think and feel and in how we behave in the world, and that we do have the power to create a more desirable future world by committing in the present to change what we are doing now. Thirukkural is a positive, visionary, and evolutionary futurist who depicts a more desirable future, articulating the positive values which will surely create a better world than his age. I wish to cite a few examples. Even though I am able to give you a detailed study, as I am afraid my lecture may become a lengthy one, and the minister has got many important agenda, and I don't want to waste your time hearing many things on the socio-economic aspects of literature. Futuristic study is, of course, an interdisciplinary study. I appeal to the students, research scholars, if there are any interested, to have a futuristic perspective on the literature, whichever language they belong to. You see, in Valluvar, he conceives a state. His conception of state is as follows. A country should have a perennial natural yield, a band of noblemen endowed with virtues, wealthy persons without negative qualities. Talla vilayulum, takkarum, tagvila, chelvarum servadu naadu. And he tells that Urubasiyum, Oapiniyum, Servagayum, Seradi Yelvadu naadu. A country is that which continues to be free from excessive starvation, irremediable epidemics, and destructive force. And he also tells that Palguruvum, Parsayum, Utpagayum, Vendalaikum, Kolgurumbum, Illadu naadu. A country is that which is without various irregular associations, destructive internal enemies, and murderous savages who sometimes harass the sovereign. The conditions laid by Thirukkural are thought-provoking. How can we get a state with a perennial natural yield? How to get a band of noblemen endowed with virtues? What is the way to obtain a host of wealthy persons without negative qualities? This Kural clearly indicates that Thirukkural is a positive, visionary, and evolutionary futurist. The Kural poem quoted above shows the vision of Thirukkural about an ideal state who motivates people through his poems to inculcate positive qualities. Agriculturists should find suitable ways and means to get a perennial natural yield. People should lead a principled life in setting themselves as exemplary citizens. Wealthy persons should keep away negative qualities and should be always adopt positive approaches. These are all the prerequisites, according to Thirukkural, to mold and shape an ideal welfare state. You can see the futuristic perspective of Thirukkural. He says, a country without irremediable diseases. Even 2041 years after Thirukkural, hunger, poverty, epidemics, and terrorism are the real enemies for mankind. About 25,000 people die every day of hunger or hunger-related causes, according to United Nations. This is one person every 3.5 seconds. Unfortunately, it is children who die most often. Diarrheal diseases such as cholera and dysentery kill about 1.6 million people each year, almost all of them children. In the entire history of mankind, it is believed that tuberculosis has killed more people than any other diseases. In shorter periods of time, the epidemics of Black Death and AIDS have killed more. Tuberculosis was prevalent in ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, and India. And in 7th century London, it was responsible for 1 for 5 deaths in London. The so-called childhood diseases such as measles, pertussis or whooping cough, tetanus, and diphtheria are responsible for less than 1 million deaths per year. Over 1 million people die from malaria each year, and many millions more are seriously weakened by it. More than 2 million children alone die due to AIR, that is acute respiratory infection. AIDS is now second only to Black Death as the largest epidemic history. AIDS kills over 2 million people a year, or about 1 person every 15 seconds. The death toll surprisingly includes a lot of children who are often infected with HIV virus during pregnancy or through breastfeeding. Death due to terrorist attacks and counter-terrorist retorts are also alarming throughout the world. In this context, Thirukkural's definition for a welfare state that a country is that which continues to be free from excessive starvation, irremediable epidemics, and destructive force proves him a positive visionary futurist. The following verses of Thirukkural clearly show his far-sighted approach. Freedom from epidemics, wealth, produce, happiness and protection. These are 5, Leonard say, ornaments of a country. Although in possession of all the above mentioned excellences, there are no uses in a country in the absence of harmony between the sovereign and the subjects. I do not dare delve deep in advanced research to point out the in-depth analysis of Thirukkural about an ideal state which is highly futuristic and has a relevance till date. There are many comparisons of Thirukkural's approach with that of Aristotle, Plato, Marcus Aurelius, Machiavelli, Chanakya, and many more theoreticians done by many learned scholars. In this lecture, I just wish to give an introduction of Thirukkural's futuristic approach, and I request the students to probe further to find and admire the uniqueness of Thirukkural. Thirukkural's definitions for an ideal state: powerful army, mighty minister, able administrators, and dynamic investigators of the intelligence wing, loyal citizens, and other wings of administration are completely irrelevant even today. To cite a few examples, the chapters of Thirukkural on detectives, Ottaridal, and the envoy are astonishingly relevant for today's polity. According to Thirukkural, spying by spies, the things they tell, to test by other spies as well. ஒற்று ஒற்றி தந்த பொருளையும் மற்றுமோர் ஒற்றினால் ஒற்றிக்கொடல். Spying by spies, the things they tell, to test by other spies as well. In these days, the spies of a government are bought by its hostile country, providing a huge amount of money and indulging in other modes of gratification. Thirukkural's idea of spying spies by the spies confidentially, a wonderful strategy which will be very useful to a head of state for maintaining defense as well as prohibiting offense. Even though the idea is many centuries old, the advancement in modern science and technology is very much useful in implementing this, and I think there is no need to elaborate it. And another example, the chapter on the envoy. The chapter on the envoy is also highly relevant today. Thirukkural defines the qualities of an envoy. For a diplomat in its modern age, these qualities are necessary. Diplomacy is the art and practice of conducting negotiations between representatives of groups or states. It usually refers to international diplomacy, the conduct of international relations through the intercession of professional diplomats with regard to issues of peacemaking, trade, war, economics, culture, environment, and human rights. International treaties are usually negotiated by diplomats prior to endorsement by national politicians. In an informal or social sense, diplomacy is the employment of tact to gain a strategic advantage or to find mutually acceptable solutions to a common challenge, one set of tools being the phrasing of statements in a non-confrontational or polite manner. Almost all the qualities Thirukkural prescribes for an envoy is apt and agreeable for the modern diplomat. அன்பு, அறிவு, ஆராய்ந்த சொல்வன்மை தூதுரை பார்க்க இன்றியமையாத மூன்று. Love to his sovereign, knowledge of his affairs, and a discriminating power of speech before other sovereigns are the 3 sine qua non qualifications of an ambassador. அறிவு, உரு, ஆராய்ந்த கல்வி இம்மூன்றன் செறிவுடையான் செல்கவினைக்கு. Sense, goodly grace, and a knowledge exquisite, who had these 3 for envoys takes it. If we venture to show the relevance of Thirukkural to the modern world, the lecture may exceed its limit. We have got a diplomat. We have got our Indian High Commissioner. He is an embodiment of Thirukkural Thudu, and he possesses all the qualities. And he is maintaining the cultural harmony and unity in diversity. So diplomacy can be learned from Thirukkural, which is very agreeable to the modern age. My point is the futuristic perspective of Thirukkural lies in its universal approach and objective manner. For example, one example, தென்னாடுடைய சிவனையை போற்றி எந்நாட்டவர்க்கும் இறைவா போற்றி. When Manikavasar wrote these lines, did he imagine that our worshipful saint Ornadigal will come from India to propagate the ideals here? Has he imagined about to put forth Arunachalam? எந்நாட்டவர்க்கும் இறைவா போற்றி, written by Manikavasaka, and the எந்நாட்டவர்க்கும் here Mauritius. We can see here 2 cultural ambassadors. So, every poet who is far-sighted in his approach and is an advocate of very many things for the humankind are all futuristic. Today, futuristic science, they give very many parameters. The parameters, how to determine the futuristic approach of the poets are laid down by the futuristic studies. By these studies, we can further find many explanations for poems, especially Thirukkural, which is a beacon, which is a leading light for the whole humankind. Thiruvallur belongs to a world 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, which was divided into many kingdoms, where there are wars and conflicts specific to the area. You see, now we are telling that universal humanism. Thiruvallur, he wrote of one man. But what is the age of Thiruvallur? At his age, India is divided by very many kingdoms. 56 samasthanas are very many kingdoms. And in that age, he dreamt of the one word concept, the whole mankind concept. He never used the word Tamil or Tamil Nadu. He had not mentioned the name of a particular religion. He has given much importance to women, thereby avoiding a male-dominating approach and optimistically avoiding the feminist approach, the feministic approach from critics. An ardent learner of Thirukkural will surely admire the futuristic approach of a poet who has dreamt of a warless world without any conflict, a happy family, and a frictionless society. Mahatma Gandhi Society, Mahatma Gandhi Institute is an apt institution to speak about Thiruvallur and to have a Thiruvallur chair. It's a very apt institution because Gandhi, he not only propagated Thirukkural, he not only preached Thirukkural, he practiced Thirukkural. His life was a message of Thirukkural. So, I am very fortunate to give a lecture, to give a brief lecture at least, to give a brief lecture at the MGI, Mahatma Gandhi Institute, and Rabindranath Tagore Institute. Tagore also hailed Thiruvallur. So, I am very fortunate to stand before this august audience and to tell you a few words about Thirukkural. I don't know how many words inspired you. If at all I am successful, you should go and you should learn Thirukkural through English. You have got GU Post translation and very many translations available. And I appeal the audience to read Thirukkural, and I appeal the scholars to probe further interdisciplinarily, not in a word and meaning, not in the surface meaning of the word, interdisciplinarily to survey the excellence of Thirukkural. Thank you, one and all. Vanakkam. Nandri.